and welcome to the Fun with Friends podcast, the Wondering Creatives Edition. I'm your host, Arden Coots, and today I'm joined by Lea Ann Slotkin. Lea Ann is an artist and a creative coach for artists as well. So thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
I'm really happy to be here, Arden. Thanks for having me.
I am very excited to have you on the podcast and to jump in and learn more about how artists can create a unique business and to also learn more about your artwork. So again, I really can't thank you enough for being on today.
I'm excited to chat.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, Lea Ann?
Sure. I currently live in Decatur, Georgia, but I'm originally from a very small town in Illinois, but I've been in the South for a long time, over 20 years. I'm from a pretty big family. I grew up on a farm, and I think that influences my artwork in a lot of ways. And before I started the art gig full time, I spent a number of years working in women's fashion, and which I think that also influences my artwork too.
Oh, that's really, I don't think or maybe you told me previously and I'd forgotten, but I didn't realize you were in women's fashion before moving into art full time.
Yeah, I always had kind of creative adjacent careers for a long time.
I always kind of pair like women's or like anything in the fashion industry, I guess, to, in my mind, it's like interior design, but for people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm not surprised really when someone's like, oh yeah, I started off in like fashion or again, like interior design, and now I do art full time. I'm like, yeah, that like totally makes sense.
Yes, I think it does track for sure.
And so to talk a little bit about your own art and creative journey, like you said, you started off in women's fashion, and then like, were you always interested in being an artist, or I guess you maybe just kind of like found it through your creative endeavors in fashion?
I was always a creative kid. I mean, I've always made things or created things on the side. I'm using air quotes. No one can see that. But I had a pretty active imagination as a kid, and I liked being outside, and I would draw a lot. I'd make my own doll houses out of boxes, but I never thought that being an artist was something that real people did. It seemed very other and out of reach for me. But as I said, my corporate career track was, like I said, creative adjacent. So I did women's fashion. And then when I moved to Atlanta, I worked in an art gallery for many years. And that's when I discovered that artists are just normal people, just like me and you. And that really is when I was like, okay, I think I can try to figure this out. But at that point, I was just doing it on the side.
And how would you describe your artwork? Like, what type of art do you do?
Yeah, I'm a painter primarily, and I work with acrylic. I do a lot of florals, a lot of botanicals, nature inspired. It's very colorful. It's playful, I've been told. It's not very restrained, but yeah, it's colorful and vibrant. And I also do a little bit of collage work, not a little bit. I do collage work as well with hand painted papers and things like that, which are two very kind of different ways of working, but I like doing both, like the bigger expression with painting and then kind of the smaller, more meditative work with my collage.
Ooh, I like that. Pieces. Collage pieces, that sounds like something I would really enjoy as someone who does like scrapbooking and stuff kind of on the side. I think that would, I'll have to check it out because I'm interested to see more of it. And did it take you, I'm throwing some random questions at you, but did it take you a while to kind of find your art style, or
yes,
were you,
yes and no. Like my parents, if you went to their house, it's like the progression of really, honestly, I wish they would not have it hanging. It's always been nature, always florals. So yes and no, but and even now I feel like it refines and changes. And I was looking through old photos of my work. I was like, oh yeah, I remember when I used to do some hand stitching in pieces, and it's like you move past it and forget. It's always been a consistent theme.
And progression over time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, nice. I like that it's a nature-based always. Florals. Ugh. I'm a huge fan of like other people's work that includes that, but then also like I love photographing floral flowers, flora, fauna, all of it. And then also like I do a little bit of digital art, and it's almost always flowers.
Yeah.
So,
you can
a huge
just
fan.
See so many different shapes and shadows and colors and
So you not only do art and have been doing art for a while, but you also do creative coaching for artists.
I do.
Which I find fast. Every time I meet a coach for creatives, I'm always like, ooh, let's dig into it because it's so fascinating. And there's so many topics. What are some of the areas that you commonly focus on when it comes to your creative coaching?
Yeah, well, I work with artists in various stages of their career or practice because not everybody has to make a career out of it. I know if you're on social media, you might feel like you have to, but you don't. You can do it just because you love it. But the common things that we work on are, we do a lot of goal setting, but then along with that comes like a lot of limiting beliefs and how do I make money as an artist and other people's opinions of what I'm doing? How do I create a practice or a business? A lot of stuff comes up, but those are kind of the imposter syndrome. That's a big one.
Oh yeah. That's a real common one. That we cover a lot on the podcast, or we've had people talk about before, is just imposter syndrome and how to like work through that and overcome that. So it seems to be a really popular and common thing amongst artists.
Yeah. And I don't know that it ever really goes away. I think it can get quieter, but I mean, and who's to say that if you're not an accountant, you don't have imposter syndrome? I don't think it's unique to us, but I think maybe we feel it a little bit more because it's a very vulnerable place to put your artwork out into the world.
Yeah, you're taking a little piece of yourself and kind of exposing it to everyone, and you kind of just cross your fingers and you're like, all right, here we go.
Yeah, and that's where the coach has a lot of feelings come up when you first start doing that.
Yeah, I might have to hit you up. I just like do it. I just released because I imagine you work with a variety of artists, right? Or like different creatives, so not just like painters.
Correct.
Yeah, so I just released a book, so I'm like waiting for people to start giving me feedback, and I'm like, okay, once I get the feedback, I might need a little help, like just overcoming all of which hopefully I get feedback, honestly.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's nice to know that there are folks out there that like you as a creative can like reach out to and be like, okay, I'm having a moment with my emotions. How can we work through this? Like, what's the next steps? Can you help me come up with a plan? All of that.
Yeah. And I think too, just having a safe space to kind of unpack it all, because it's so much going on between our ears. And especially if you're just getting started, you're like, okay, you're really excited. Like, I've made this decision. This is what I'm going to do. I've always wanted to do this. And you're like, I'm going for it. And then you're like, oh shit, now what? Right?
Yep.
And it's like, you have this vision out here, but then you have to back it way up and do all the small steps. And you don't know how to do X, Y, and Z. And how do you hold on to that vision and take the steps necessary to get you there? Because that's when all the overwhelm and fear and doubt and all that comes up.
Yeah, that I almost want to say like project management side is where like, a lot of folks get hung up. I know personally, it's something I experience a lot is like, you have these big ideas and you're like, okay, I can see the end goal.
Yeah.
But how do I get there? And like you're saying, you start thinking about it and you're like, oh my gosh, there's just so many steps, so many things I have to do. Yeah. And you just like get, what's it called? Like analysis paralysis, where you just like shut down and you're like, I can't do any of this.
Yes. That I see that a lot, definitely. And unfortunately, sometimes, a lot of people make that mean that something's gone wrong and give up, but really it's just like you're learning a new skill and your brain's going to try to tell you that something has gone wrong because it's learning something new. But nothing's really gone wrong. You just have to manage your mind and get very good at feeling uncomfortable and keeping your word to yourself.
Do you see a lot of folks that go with like the motivation of going? I guess that kind of plays into what we were talking about just now with like the paralysis side of it. But that's something I imagine folks struggle with as well a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's hard when you're just starting out, if you don't have any deadlines and you're just making work, and then you're like, what do I do with all this work? And it's also hard because, as you know, there's this, is it romanticizing or fanciful thinking about being an artist? You have to wait for inspiration to strike. And they're like, well, I just don't feel like it. I don't feel like it. And it's like, well, then it's probably not going to be a business. And that's fine. Because, you know, and we work through that a lot. And at the end of the day, it is a job that we choose to do. So we have to show up as a professional.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that means showing up when you don't feel like it.
Yeah. I was going to say lots of like time management, project management type stuff. So I love that. Like, I'm just like, to have someone help with kind of organizing your thoughts and putting like a schedule together and a plan, like, I don't know. I think that would be insanely useful to so many people.
I think if I had done it in a real way, like when I first transitioned from being in the corporate world to figuring this out, I hired a business coach and met with him like once. Like I didn't know what coaching was, but it was helpful. But I think if I had someone like me, like for, I don't know, a couple months or even longer term, I think I probably could have shaved years off the process, quite frankly. But, you know, I don't regret it.
Yeah. It's amazing what, like, just having that, like, just having someone to be almost like a soundboard.
Yeah.
It's really fantastic how that can help you, like, noodle through all those thoughts and questions you have. So I love that you do that and that you help other creatives. It's such a cool job.
Yeah. And I mean, the desire to create work and share it with people, I mean, that's a special thing. And if I can help somebody do that in a way that feels good to them and makes them proud, that's it feels like something I'm grateful to be able to do.
Yeah. I imagine it's a very fulfilling thing to be able to do.
It really is. Yeah.
And something that when we had spoke earlier, you had said something that like really stuck with me, and it's that you help creatives create a business that is as unique as the art that they make. And I loved that so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, because it is truly, there is not a one size fits all kind of like, I was going to say subscription, I guess, for lack of a better word, for like having an art business. And I just think that putting it that way is beautiful. And I definitely want to talk a little bit about how you help creatives build their art practices. If you want to share a little bit about like what goes into that process.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the first things, if I'm working with someone, it's like, what do you want to do? Do you want to, well, let me back up. Like I've worked with people who have really big jobs, but they are creative at heart and they want to have a practice that helps them de-stress. And that's kind of like their mindfulness practice and helping them find space in their very busy life to do that. And then there are some people who are like, nope, I want to make a business. I want to, get my work in galleries. I want to sell online. So it's determining what is it you want to do? And that's a very personalized individual question to answer. And as far as helping them decide that, it's just a lot of asking good questions and listening and holding space for them to kind of untangle the thoughts, because it can be a little busy up in our brains. But as far as creating a practice that they love, is that what you asked?
Yeah,
I lost the thread a little bit there, Arden. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you were on track. I'm tracking what you're saying. So, okay. But yeah, what goes into building an art practice that they love?
Yes. I think one of the big things is not comparing what they're doing to what they see on social media, because that's a big deal. And as great as the free marketing that Instagram and Facebook and all that can be, it can also be a lot of compare and despair, or it's very easy to compare your beginning to someone else's middle or years down the road stage. So it's really getting clear about that. If you're just starting out, one of the first things I'm like, gotta put your blinders on because of all the outside influences, and gotta try a bunch of things and see what works and see what doesn't. I mean, I know there's probably people want an answer like do X, Y, and Z. And there is some of that. There's practical things to it. I mean, you've got to have a place where people can find you. Do you have a website, or do you have just at least a landing page? Do you have an email list? Things like that. Practical stuff. That's pretty easy. But it's the what comes up when, like I said, they make that decision. This is what I want to do.
Yeah. And I imagine that when I think about building an art practice that I love or that is unique to me, I think a lot of it has to do with, I guess, just like what makes them unique, what makes you stand out, and like working through that and how to incorporate that into what you were just talking about, like your social media and your newsletter and how you represent yourself and all that. And it sounds like that's something that you also can kind of like help creatives like figure out and incorporate and work through as well.
Yeah, it's a lot about what is your intention and where are you in, what's your intention and your integrity for you personally. And then from there, it's making plans and executing and rinse and repeat and evaluating what works and what doesn't, and then managing your mind during the process. And it takes a lot of patience and willingness to try things to see what feels right.
And you mentioned that earlier as well, like you might have to try more than one thing. And I feel like a lot, like, I know I can just speak from my own personal experience that it is definitely, I like, for me, it's been a challenge figuring out what will be successful and what won't. But then it's like trying to balance, like, well, I tried this. Did I try it long enough for it to be successful? Like, should I have, I did stickers for quite a while. I was like, oh, well, should I have done stickers for 3 to 5 years before calling it quits?
Yeah.
Or was 1 year enough time to know whether or not it was going to be successful? So I think that's an area where a lot of like creatives might struggle as well, especially folks that do like markets and stuff. And you're not like necessarily selling. It's like, do I call it quits after a year? Do I keep going? Like, how do I?
Yeah. And that's like such an individual, personal decision. I think it helps to really know your numbers and be very clear about what you have coming in and going out and what works for you personally. And yeah, it's just a personal decision. And I think pivoting, there's never anything wrong with pivoting. And I think you kind of get a feeling. Do you think that? Like, are you like, you know what? You kind of get this feeling like, I think this is time to maybe shift a little bit or try something else. I know. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say yes. I was going to agree with that. And then also how you said, looking at what's coming in and what's going out, because that's something I did. I had to sit down and say, okay, like, I'm spending this much on market fees and I'm getting, but not, meeting my booth fee. And, so yeah, it definitely was sitting down and being like, okay, is it worth it or not? So yeah, couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I know when I can tell when I'm like making a decision because it feels like a good decision and I like my reasons, and making a decision because maybe I feel uncomfortable or I don't want to do something. Like, I know myself well enough to know those two different ways of deciding on something and just getting clear on that.
Yeah. I think that's great. Yeah. I think that's a good thing for folks to kind of practice, is like, maybe after you've done it for X amount of time, like if it's not vibing or like you don't have a good feeling, then maybe it's time to say, okay.
Yeah.
What's
and
missing?
There's nothing wrong with that. And I mean, honestly, one thing I tell everyone, it's like, you just have to make a bunch of bad work. Just keep making it and have a big old pile of bad work that you don't ever want anyone to see. And that's how you get traction.
I like that. Yeah. And that's how you get feedback too, which I think is so important.
It is important. Yeah, absolutely. I think if you're just starting out, the more that you can get feedback, the better, and probably the quicker you'll see results.
Yeah. Oh, so important. Feedback is so important. Let's see. I was going to ask you like your top 2 tips for creatives building their art practice. I feel like you've shared quite a few like great tips, like, really set your intention, know what your goal is going into it, having some type of plan to reach your goals. Like those are all like great tips. Did you have any others like that you kind of like had on the top of your head of like, how creatives can build their art practices?
I think you have to be willing to feel uncomfortable and not make it mean that anything has gone wrong.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
That's a really good one.
I mean, I think that's probably any entrepreneur, don't you think? I mean,
yeah. Uncomfortable doesn't necessarily mean failure.
Oh, absolutely not. Generally, like the more uncomfortable I am, it's like the more I know that I'm on the right track because it's really pushing me.
Yeah. Like, I wish I could remember. I feel like there's a quote out there that is like, the things that are the most worth doing are the ones that make you the most uncomfortable, or something like that.
Exactly right. So like for me, it's like, how high is the barf factor? I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that. Well, I guess I'll do that.
That's your barometer for like, I guess we're going all in. Oh my gosh.
I would say that, be willing to feel uncomfortable, and going back to make a lot of bad art, and that is okay. And then it'll eventually start getting better.
Yeah. Figure out what works.
And I know you said 2 things, but I'm going to give you 3.
Oh, please do.
Really embrace a beginner's mindset. I think because we have a lot of experience and it's maybe not our first gig, maybe we've had a career in something else. I think it's hard for us as adults to be okay being a beginner at something.
Oh, I'm like, couldn't agree more. Like I feel like maybe that's where a lot of like imposter syndrome comes in as well, is that like, am I good enough? But also like, I know oftentimes we'll be like, oh my gosh, like I'm, 36 and I'm starting over and blah, 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 or, have that. So yeah, I definitely get in that mindset where I'm just like, oh my gosh, like starting all over again. And you get a little, like, it's easy, I think, to get a little like deflated and everything. So I like that, like embrace the beginner's mindset and let that be a part of the experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a really good one. What about for folks that are feeling like maybe they're looking to transition from a full-time job or a hobby in art and want to build that art business, but are feeling kind of, what word am I looking for? Unconfident? Is that the word?
Not feeling
Not feeling confident. What's the opposite of confident?
Not confident.
I will leave this in the episode. It just shows everyone how well my brain works.
Oh my gosh, but I was like,
not feeling confident.
Insecure?
Insecure. Yes. Yes. Thank you.
What would you say to people who are just starting out and feeling insecure?
Yeah.
Feeling insecure is not a problem. I mean, I know it doesn't feel great, but
if you had how to boost the confidence, I guess, maybe if there is a way.
Yeah, I think that is start small. Don't quit. Yeah, start small. Don't quit. Put your blinders on, do the work. Have some fun. I mean, we're artists, we're creative people. It's a fun thing that we get to do, right? Yeah. I mean, and sometimes it's like, people are like, oh, I can't believe, I mean, I've been guilty, like, feeling like it can feel like a slog sometimes. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is what I've always wanted to do. Yeah. This is great. I get to come to my studio every day, play with paint, make things that hopefully someone will want to put in their home, which makes me feel super grateful. I think maybe getting back to I know this is such a cliche, getting back to your why you want to do it. And really just like 1% improvement. We just have this idea that it should not take as long as it takes. And things worthwhile take time.
Yeah.
Ask for help. Like, go to someone, hire a coach. There you go. That should be my answer.
Yeah. There you go. Hire a coach to help you out.
Or, find someone that's a few steps ahead of you and ask questions.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing about, like, usually you can find folks that are in the creative community or other artists. And most of the time, I feel like they're willing to sit down with you and be like, yeah, like, let's, like, again, be that like soundboard and like help you out. So that's a good thing about some like art communities.
Oh yeah. I have never met anyone that wasn't willing to be helpful. So I think it's a good community to be a part of.
Yeah. Oh, I had a really good, like, as you were talking, I had like a really good like thought, and now it's gone. Oh no!
Oh my gosh, Arden, I do that so much.
Oh, it stinks because it was a really good question. It had to do with art business just getting started. I think you said small steps, but yeah,
1%.
It's gone now. It's gone now.
All right. Well, maybe it'll come back.
Exactly. And I know I've been asking you for a lot of advice and tips, so you may not have any left to give because you've shared so much today. But do you have, I guess, any final words of like encouragement for listeners that are, again, maybe like looking to put themselves out there more with their art and creativity?
Yeah, just start small. Be nice to yourself when you're in the beginning stages because you're figuring things out. Heaping a lot of judgment on not knowing how to do something does not help you figure something out. Generally speaking, ask for help. Be okay with it looking a little messy in the beginning.
Yeah, I like I like that kind of chaos, growth from chaos, kind of.
Yeah. And, I mean, there's so many ways now to learn online and things, just be a lifelong learner and keep figuring out what lights you up.
Try a bunch of new things, which we like to encourage on this podcast. Get out there and try a bunch of different stuff and find something that you really enjoy and love and want to keep doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with having an art practice. I think a lot of people feel like they have to turn it into a business. And it can just be for yourself, like, because you love to do it.
Yeah.
It's no less valuable.
I think that's a good thing to remind people of, because I do feel like, you get on social media and everyone has a business of some sort. And so I think definitely know it's easy to like get caught up in that and be like, oh, well, what am I producing? What am I putting out there? Like,
yeah. Don't tie your value up into your bottom line.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's really good. Another great piece of advice. Oh my gosh. Is there anything that you're currently working on that you would like to share with the listeners?
Yeah, I have a lot of fun projects coming up for my personal work that I'm excited about that can, if you follow me on social, you can see down the road. And then I'm creating a course that I'm excited about. That's how to sell your art online in a way that feels easy and fun. So how to do kind of like your first launch, or maybe if you've done a launch before and it hasn't gone so well.
Nice.
Yeah, because it's a process that I take a lot of my coaching clients through because they're so afraid to put themselves out there. I'm like, let's just do a small launch, like, 6 to 10, however many pieces you feel like you can handle making. And we go through everything, like, okay, what size are they going to be? Is it going to be paper on canvas? Then how are you going to ship it? How are you going to pack it? How do you factor in your prices? We go step by step by step by step. So I'm creating a course for that.
That's wonderful.
So people can get on my wait list.
Ooh, and so where can they do that? Where can they find you online and stuff?
It's in my Instagram bio, which is just Lea Ann Slotkin, and then on my website.
Awesome. And I will put Lea Ann's information in the episode description so y'all can find it, click on it, and it will take you where you need to go. I'm excited to see that course. It sounds like it's going to be insanely useful.
I hope so. That's the goal.
Yeah, it like, honestly, because I know that's something, again, like in my own personal experience, I've struggled with is like that whole process. Like, how am I going to ship things? How am I going to, like, all of that again can be like so overwhelming. It's easy to just be like, nope.
Exactly. Yeah. And then once you do it once, you can just repeat it and expand it, So it has been I've seen a lot of my clients. It's a very good confidence booster. It's very good with practical skills that you need. And I'm with you the whole way, so.
I love that. That's awesome. Oh, I can't, like, you've really shared so much good information today.
Oh,
like,
gosh.
I can't thank you enough for being on today, Lea Ann. Like, really.
I'm excited. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I feel like I can literally take like sound bites from throughout you've just shared so much, and it's been really fantastic having you on. And I look forward to possibly having you back on the podcast again for another
anytime.
Episode. So I'd like to thank Lea Ann again for joining me today. It was amazing having you on the podcast. I'd also like to thank the listeners for tuning into today's episode. If you have questions, comments, thoughts, feelings about the episode or any of the episodes, you can text or call us on our hotline, 252-419-6004, and we will include them in a future episode of the podcast. So if you have questions specifically for Lea Ann, you can let us know, and we will answer those questions for you. Also, be sure to like, rate, and review the podcast, and follow us on Instagram at Fun with Friends Podcast. And with that, as a reminder, get out there, try something new, and have some fun. Goodbye. Thanks for listening to the Fun with Friends podcast, a CEI media production. Please like, rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast as it helps us greatly. You can follow us on Instagram at Fun with Friends Podcast and on Facebook. If you would like to support the podcast, you can become a Patreon for just $5 a month. The link is in the episode description. Now get out there, try something new, and have some fun. Bye.